Okay, good morning, and yes, as you can see, we are home. The motorhome is not home, but we are home, which is a plus for us. It was very kind of, I don't know, it was stressful being stuck in a state that you really didn't want to be in any longer than you wanted to be in. And we were there for a full week before we got the final, that's it, this engine's coming apart and we're going to be fixing it. Now, I know there's a lot of armchair mechanics out there that said, oh, they should have pulled the heads right away. I feel that the mechanics that have this thing right now in their possession have done a wonderful job in diagnosing the problem and not really just, they weren't throwing parts at it. They had reasons for what they did. The crazy thing was, and some of the last conversation that I had with Brock McCoy, F&M Auto in Seminole, Oklahoma, have this machine, and they're doing a fine job, in my honest opinion. They know more about these engines than I do, obviously, because I've never had to tear one down like this. The reasons they did the things that they did were explained to me, and I agreed. Just through research that I did on these motors and the reasoning behind it and what happened, and then the eventual, it threw zero codes. None. Zero. There were no codes thrown. The reason it didn't throw any codes was because it was sparking, it was not misfiring, and the injectors were injecting just like they were supposed to. The problem was that the valves, now we're pretty sure, I'm more certain than he is of this fact, the catalytic converter's plugged. When we got that bad gas, that's when everything went all to shit. Now, whether we got bad gas in North Carolina or we got bad gas in Arkansas, my thoughts are that we didn't actually get the bad gas in Arkansas. We got the bad gas in North Carolina before we climbed up that 6-mile hill, and it started to do some funky shit to my machine. And I have felt that it didn't have the power that it should have had when we were climbing the hill in North Carolina, because I've driven this machine many times, and I've gone up some pretty steep hills in Pennsylvania with it, and I just felt that there was something lacking in the horsepower-wise. But I thought, you know what? I don't know. This is a really steep hill, and it was 6 miles long, and it drew that engine down pretty low. We were only going about 45 mile an hour up the hill, which that engine was screaming at like 4,500 RPMs. I mean, that's where it was at. That's where it stayed for about 6 miles, 6, 7, 8 miles. And that's where it could have possibly started to do the collapse of the catalytic converter. That's in my thoughts. So by the time we got through Tennessee and then into Arkansas, of course, Tennessee is just slight little hills in the beginning, and then they're just gradual hills on out through. And I thought it was downshifting too easy going out through there myself, but we were pushing it. I mean, we were going 70, 75 mile an hour. And I say we were pushing it. Not really. The engine turns at 2,800 RPMs at that speed. It's just kind of chugging right along, not really any concern for those hills, and it would just downshift and then scream up to 45 to 5,000 RPMs and get over the hill and then down the other way. And it did that all the way out till the other end of Arkansas and into Oklahoma. We got to Sallisaw, Oklahoma, and that is where it started to miss. Right? So we pushed it, dragging a cylinder for quite a ways, and it was only dragging at low RPM. When you got up or under a load, then you could feel it hit. But it never misfired, or it would have threw codes. So that was just the beginning of it. I changed the spark plugs. Spark plugs, brand new, fresh spark plugs, were hot. They were the right plugs for it. They were Autolite spark plugs, and I still have them. They're in the motorhome. And by the time we got out to Texas, it started to miss again. And I thought, well, that's weird. Maybe we do have a coil pack or something else going wrong with this thing. Pulled an injector off to see if it was an injector. And I don't have my footage on my GoPro just yet, but you will see some of this stuff. I'm not going to make it a 200-part series. I'm just going to splice it together, and you'll get it all in about 20 minutes or maybe 2. It ain't going to be a 100-part series. It might be a 2 or 3-part series. So just in the progression of this thing, so that everybody that's been a naysayer all along saying that I'm an idiot, the guy that's working on it is an idiot, and all this stuff. But anyways, long story short, we made it all the way to Seminole, Oklahoma. When we pulled into Seminole, Oklahoma, I tore the fuel tank down because I thought that the pump was bad, because I stuck my ear on the fuel tank and it sounded like it was grinding. And that's the most logical thing on a misfire like that the pump has failed, and the way it was running and shaking, it felt like it did not have enough fuel. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I had the problem that I have. And the reasons that was given to me, the problems that I have. So, pull the fuel tank down. I still bear the scars. My back is all scratched up. Whatever the hell they used in that parking lot, they were like razor blades. They cut through my shirt, my t-shirt. I didn't have a t-shirt. I had a tank top on. My flannel shirt that I had on, and a pullover hoodie that I had on. And on both shoulders, they're cut up. They're cut up and sore. So, neither here nor there. That job's done. Put the new fuel pump in, fired it up, and it just still rocked and rolled and made all kinds of a mess. I changed spark plugs. I did that. The spark plugs I took out were all black. They were black from carbon. Not all of them. There were 2 that were not. And those are the only 2 cylinders that this thing was firing on and maintained firing on. All right, so let's fast forward to the first diagnosis. First diagnosis is timing chains. All right, I figured it skipped timing because of the way it was running. And it did. It skipped a half a turn on one crank, on one camshaft. Half a turn. That far out. He takes it apart. He's like, man, I don't know why this thing skipped timing like that. Did you run it out of oil? He's like, no, I did not run it out of oil. So we're thinking that the oil pump is junk. Change the oil pump. Let's change the oil pump, change timing gears, change the timing chains, timing tensioners, and timing guides. Okay. This is an asshole of a job, and he did a phenomenal job. I will say, he did that from underneath and above. He did not pull the radiators off or anything, and I was like, man, I'd have been pulling radiators out to do this job, because I'm bigger than that guy. But the other guy's a pretty string bean, so he could probably get in there, but they had 2 guys working on it, but Brock did the 99% of the work on it. Puts it all back together again, does a compression test. Not a leak down, a compression test. Because he figured that would straighten it out. He figured that the tensioners had starved for oil and started to ratchet, and then they fell away, and it bloop, skipped over. 2 teeth on one side, half a turn on the other. He says, I'm not even sure where this thing did this. So, does that compression. Then he's like, well, okay, won't run. Can't get he gets compression on 2 different cylinders, but not on the cylinders that he had compression on before. He says, this is really weird. He says, it's weird. And he's like, it would have been a big help if there were some codes, but there were no codes. So he just had to go as a mechanic and do exploratory surgery on this thing. So he's watching and looking, I guess, as they're turning it over, and he realizes that the valves are not closing all the way. The valve lash adjusters, which are on the backside of the rocker arm, were either compressed or extended. I'm not sure which way they were. I would say that they were fully compressed, and they were not allowing the valve to close all the way. And so he's like, well, there's something wrong with these things, so let's change those out. They're not expensive. I mean, it was $100, I think, for the whole set of 20 of them. So he changes them out, does a leak down test at this point. He's like, I'm doing a leak down test. Does a leak down test. I can't get the compression that I need. It's leaking down too fast. And I'm sure some of you are saying, we should do a leak down test first. Well, he didn't. He figured that these little things, because these motors, if one thing goes bad, it can cascade. And anybody that works on Fords knows this, that when one little problem happens, if you don't get it taken care of right away, like it starts throwing codes and says, hey, stupid, you better stop this engine. My suggestion to you on a modular engine, like Ford has in these things, the Triton engines, stop the damn thing. Stop it. Just shut it off. Let somebody, or if you know what you're doing, fix it, because this is what happens. Okay, he changes those out. He does leak down. He's like, listen, I got compression in these things, but it's not where it needs to be. He says it's just, there's only 2 cylinders that are actually working properly. He says it's really weird. He says there's only 2 cylinders, and they were both the ones, I think he said they were the 2 in the very back of the block. And he says, that's weird. So he decided to pull the heads. Okay, pulls the heads off, pulls a head off. This thing looked pristine. The exhaust manifold, pristine, like it's brand new, like somebody just bolted it on, but the bolts are all rusty. It got so hot from something. He said, I don't know why it got so hot. And I was like, well, I got a feeling my cats are plugged. And he's like, you might be right. So it got so hot that the valve seats were actually sinking into the aluminum head. These heads on this particular engine are aluminum. I'm not a fan of aluminum heads. I'm not a fan of aluminum heads after this one, but whatever. They're light. That's why these engines can get higher gas mileage, because they're not such a heavy engine. And you can get better gas mileage out of a lighter engine. And aluminum is very, very durable. So whatever these valve seats are made out of, they're not steel. They're probably some nickel alloy or something that can take the heat. Well, they take the heat so well that they actually sunk into the head. From the front to the back, the 2 back cylinders, the ones that are closest to the rear of the engine or the transmission side, those were the coolest, because the heat builds at the front and those 2 manifolds exhaust to the back. So all the heat built up there. He says, man, they must have been glowing redder than fire. You know, he said they were hot. So at that point, when those seats sank, one starts to sink, the heat starts sinking these things, and then you have to push the engine harder. More fuel, harder, hotter. More fuel, harder, hotter. So the front ones, they start missing. The first cylinder that I lost, I know, was on the driver's side, second one back. That was the one that was missing when I changed these spark plugs out. And then once I got the spark plugs changed out, it was hot enough fire that it would ignite the fuel quick enough that it would go away. That mist would go away. And the gaps were really wide. So, but anyway, they collapsed all the way back. The more these things sunk, the hotter I got it, because I was pushing the engine harder. Just because that's just the way it works. It's like, all right, I need to maintain my speed at 75 mile an hour, or I'm going to get run over. So we're maintaining the speed. By the time this thing did finally fail completely, like to the point where I was stuck alongside the road, I had that pedal, I only had like a half an inch to the floor before, well, the last 5 miles of the run was a dead run, and we were only going about 45 mile an hour. I had the pedal pegged because I was missing on probably 6 or 7 cylinders were missing. They were actually just blowing the fire right past the valves. So that's what happened. After all of his mechanical skills were put together, he says, I'd have never thought that this would have happened. He says, I've seen it before. He said, I don't know what the hell you were doing, but I'm like, no, listen, this thing, it started in Arkansas. So that's it. So pull the heads off. You're going to need new heads. I'm like, no shit, Sherlock, And I said, well, how's this sound? You got a junkyard close? You could pull a couple of heads off of somebody in a junkyard? He said, Wesley, this motor is so nice. It's such a clean engine. He says, with one of this age, he says, they're never this clean. I don't want to put somebody else's heads on this thing that are, who knows how many miles on them, and put those heads on this engine, and then in 20, 30,000 miles, you start having problems again. He says, it's just not something I want to do. He says, and I don't know, you tell me to do it, I'll do it. I said, no. I said, I want brand new heads on there. He says, no, we will only put brand new heads on there. No remands. We're putting brand new heads on this thing. So new heads, new valves, new seats, new blah, blah, blah. The injectors are fine. Brand new spark plugs, so they're fine. And so on and so forth. So that's how this is going to go. $1,500 for the heads, right? Is that what we paid for the heads? $1,530. $1,530.
Yeah, there's not to pay tax.
$1,530 for the pair of heads. 2 heads, not 1, 2 heads. Studs, gaskets, head bolts, everything to put the thing together. I don't know what it's going to cost yet, but I know that the heads were 2 brand new heads, $1,530 and change. You know, there goes William with Clicky. So I was like, great. Can you have me out of here by Monday? He says, they're on back order. Oh no, back order. He says, yeah, they're on back order, but this is a pretty good sized shop. He says, and we have some suppliers. We know the suppliers pretty well because we are a pretty decent sized shop. So we procured 2 heads. One is coming out of South Oklahoma, and the other one was coming down from up north. When he said up north, it could have been Colorado, could have been Nebraska, it could have been anywhere. He says the first head will get here on, what do you say, Monday? Yeah, Monday. First head comes in on Monday. He said the other head, they're saying, is not going to get here until Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm like, it's Thursday. I've been in Oklahoma for an entire week just waiting to get this thing on the road. I expected to get on the road yesterday or day before yesterday. Thursday, Friday at the latest. Thursday afternoon was when I was hoping to get on the road with the motorhome. So, and that was Thursday. He tells me this news. And he's like, well, he says a lot of times we'll order them like that and they'll say, oh, okay, it'll be like next Thursday before you get this thing. He says, and it'll show up on Monday, Tuesday. I was like, Monday, Tuesday. So it is Thursday now. I'll be here for tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. Monday, you may get both heads, but you're more than likely just going to get one. You may get the next head on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday for sure. He says latest is will be Thursday. So I'm going to be here an entire week? And then a week and 2 or 3 days because you're not going to get to this thing till Monday, Tuesday. The other mechanic, he's like, no, it'll be Tuesday before you're out of here. He said if this thing shows up on Thursday, he says by the time we get everything together and do the tests and everything, it'll be Monday before we get this thing sewn up and ready to rock and roll. I'm like, okay, all right, I guess do the best you can. So we got in the car and I said to Teresa, I says, listen, William is not doing well here. He is becoming an obnoxious little brat because he does not have his toys here. He does not. It is not familiar. The food is not what he's used to. We can't cook. Teresa loves to cook. Mental state for her was deteriorating because she loves to cook. And cooking in a microwave is not that it's a terrible thing. She was surviving, but she's like, you know what? I really miss cooking. I'm like, you know what? Let's pack this joint up and get the hell out of here. And that was the night before last. It was Thursday night. We packed it up. We left at about 8:30 Thursday night. We got home here last night at 10:09 last night. We pulled into the house here. Hey, this is my camera, and you're recording. Why? We don't need that. So we got here last night. I slept like the dead. I woke up this morning at 8 o'clock. I think it was 8. Yeah, 8 o'clock I woke up. Come here. 8 o'clock. This little man, he slept all night in his own crib, which is the first time he slept without me and his mother being, oh, you stink. You pooped. So, you stinky. You gotta say poo-poo and you'll put you on the potty. Anyway, I hate changing poopy diapers. I hate it. Anyways, when they get to this age and they're still pooping in their pants, it just drives me nuts. But anyway, with that being said, we're home. I got up at 8 o'clock this morning, and I decided that I would go and get my footage from my lovely GoPro and realized that I changed this little guy right here out when I was in Oklahoma, and it's still in the motorhome. So I don't want to put any footage up until I get everything back, and then that'll be in a week or so, and you'll get to see my dilemma. You get to see my dilemma then. But anyways, thanks for watching. If you're going to rail on Ford engines, just rail on the Chevys and the Dodges as well, because they're all the same. There's a problem with one, there's a problem with the other, and there's a problem with the third. It doesn't matter. They all have their issues, and it doesn't matter whether you own a Chevy, a Ford, or a Mopar product, or a Mercedes or a Toyota or a Mazda or a Mitsubishi or who the hell knows what else could possibly be out there. in this engine class size. It's just like the Cummins and the Cats. Oh, Cummins N14, best motor ever made. Well, no, it's a Cat C-15. S6NZ is the best engine ever made. And then it goes back and forth, and there's always somebody saying that a Mack motor is nothing more than a boat anchor, and a Ford motor is nothing but a boat anchor, and a Cummins engine is nothing but a boat anchor. You know how many times I've heard that? Ignorance. And it's ignorance. And if you're talking like that, you are as ignorant as you could possibly be. So just keep it to yourselves, guys. Keep the comment section friendly. If you're going to fight, fight amongst yourselves, because I don't have time for your shit. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.